Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I am your host, Keri. It's a happy, beautiful Monday here in Texas. It was rainy over the weekend, but it is gorgeous here today. Welcome to some of the regulars I see in the chat. Welcome to any new people who might have found this channel and might be hanging out. I'm always hoping I always enjoy when we get people coming over from my old ideology, people coming over from the left, and I hope some of you are here today. So I have a couple of announcements before we get started. I wrote them down this time so I don't forget any. I wrote them down in order. Let's see, a couple of dates, several dates. Let's go with it. So first of all, tonight I believe I'm going to be on Toxic Femme on Midnight's Edge, but I'm not exactly sure because Nina is still traveling, Nina Infinity. But we may be doing the panel without her. So if you haven't tuned in for Toxic Femme before, it's a really fun show. We talk mostly about culture, toxic femininity in culture, and usually Michelle from Force of Light is there, and Tom from Midnight's Edge, and then it's a whole different panel of rotating ladies. Anyway, that might be tonight. We'll see. This coming Wednesday, so because we had to reschedule that Christian panel, we're going to have two shows this Wednesday back to back. And I know that's a lot, but if you like both of them, if you happen to watch both of these shows, maybe you can watch one later instead of sitting there the whole time like I'm going to be. But 6:00 this Wednesday, we're doing another episode of that Christian panel, which usually features myself, Odin from Odin's movie review blog, and also from Friday Night Tights, Michelle from Force of Light, Brahma Bull, and then we have special guests. We've had Gothics, we've had Floral from Under a Rock, and WDW Pro. This Wednesday, we're doing another episode at 6:00. And then after the Christian panel at 8:00, Mystery Chris and I are doing a pop culture episode. And this one's really interesting to me. We're doing one on the sort of the death of the idealized nuclear family in entertainment. So we're going to be looking at the silent generation. We're going to be looking at the way the nuclear family was portrayed in entertainment in the 1950s. And that's going to be this Wednesday night at 8:00. So I hope to see some of you people there. Then here's the upcoming dates. March 7th, which is a Thursday at 6:00 Central, we're doing a live book club discussion. If you want to be a part of it, you can be on camera or in the chat. And the book we're reading is Critical Dilemma by Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer. This book is subtitled The Rise of Critical Theories and Social Justice Ideology Implications for the Church and Society. And I'm very excited about this book. I have some good news since we last hung out together, which is that Neil and or Pat, I think it's either going to be Neil or both of them, we're going to do an interview or a Q&A after the book club discussion. I'm currently working on scheduling with them. So that's going to be great because I would love to talk to them about the book. Go get a copy. You have time to read this book before March 7th if you want to be a part of it. And then I'm going to give you a date way in advance if you want to do the next book club selection. So on Thursday, May 9th at 6:00, we're going to be discussing, that's in May. You've got a lot of time to read this one. We're going to be discussing our next selection. And here, I'll just put this one up on the screen. I think I had this one pulled up. Let's see. Now, I've read this book. I was sent an advance copy of this. It's not out yet, but you can pre-order it and get it soon. Here it is. Boom. Sorry, it took a second. So this is The Queering of the American Child. The subtitle is How a New School Religious Cult Poisons the Healthy Minds and Bodies of Normal Kids. And this is by Logan Lansing with James Lindsay. It's an excellent book in very accessible language, helps parents understand the cult-like nature of queer theory, queer activism, and how it has moved into the classroom, even into pre-K. and will give parents I think, the language to better speak about what's happening in their kids' schools, or the awareness to be able to identify what's happening in their kids' schools. I would recommend it to anyone who's a parent or wants to be a parent, or and even like if you have kids who have already fallen prey to the social justice cult or the woke cult, specifically the queer part of it. I think this is going to be a great help for you at understanding what happened and perhaps how to get them out of it. So we're going to be reading this and talking about it in May. As I mentioned, you can pre-order it now. It's called The Queering of the American Child. So there you go. We also have some events coming up, and I'm pretty excited about March 29th, a Friday, is going to be, my husband and I are doing our next house concert. This will be the first one we've done in 2024. And if you've been to any of these, and I know some of you in the chat have, you can tell people what they're like. It's like an old style salon. So my husband is a very talented musician, and he's friends with lots of talented musicians. So everyone we've done so far, he's drawn from these incredible artists, and we do a different theme. So for like one show, he did classical piano pieces and arrangements, and then his friend who's an opera singer came, and that was just gorgeous. We've done a Latin music night, country, like old school country, and this one that's coming up in March is March 29th. His friend from Germany, who's an incredibly gifted musician, he plays several different instruments, and he specializes in old country. He's going to be visiting from Germany, so I know he's going to be one of the musicians there. We haven't put the ticket link up yet. If you want to get on the ticket list, like to at least know when the tickets are up, email me at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com and just put in the subject line house concert list and give me your name in chat, and I'll add you to it. The reason we do that is we don't post that link publicly because we can only fit 40 or 50 people here. We can only sell about 40 or 50 tickets. And also it's our house, so we kind of want to know who's coming. So you have to email me there, but that's going to be on Friday, March 29th. And then in April, Friday, April 26th, if you're in the Austin, Texas area, there's going to be another Minds Fest happening at the, I thought I had an image of this pulled up. Let me see. Here we go. Yeah, I do. There's going to be another Minds Fest happening at the Vulcan Theater. And this is, if you were at the last one, you know, this is so much fun. It's sort of like the Myth-Informed Better Discourse events. This one's put on by minds.com. And it's just an incredible panel of speakers. I believe at this one, they've already booked Shane Cashman, Sean Fitzgerald, the actual Justice Warrior, is going to be there. Lauren Chen, Libby Edmonds. There's a whole list of people. I'm going to be moderating a panel or two, and this is going to be in Austin in April on a Saturday, April 27th. So I hope to see you. Because that's happening on Saturday, I think what we're going to do is, here, let me put up this image. Sorry, I was a little distracted. Can you see that? There you go. There's the date, April 27th. So we were talking about doing a Deprogrammed meetup. I think it might be nice to do it the day before, because there'll be people in town, perhaps, who might want to come. So just kind of put a note, if you're interested in it, put a note. We're going to probably do something on that Friday, April 26th, and I'll let you know more about it as it develops. I think that's my whole list of things to announce. So I'm done. Let's take this down. Okay. There you go. Stop sharing. Okay. Welcome to people in the chat. Michael Collier for $4.99. Thanks for the super chat. He says, I have to fly. I'll catch the show tonight. I recommend a future show about DEI in high-risk fields. Commercial airlines are going to get people killed. Thank you, Michael. That's true. Actually, I'm not talking about any specific field today, but you could do, as you're saying, an entire episode on each of the different areas DEI has infected. And of course, air travel, the FAA is currently in the news because of many different accidents, and also because of, or near accidents, and also because of the FAA putting out, like, very openly and publicly talking about their commitment to DEI hiring practices. So I'm going to mention them a little bit today, but you're right. You could do an entire episode on each of these different fields. Thank you for the super chat. Ah, there you are. Have a great show. Okay. So today, as Michael mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about DEI. And for anyone on the left who may be watching, I hope you will stick with us, because I think coming from that world, which I used to be in that world, and when I say the left, I'll clarify, because I had someone ask me about this recently. I don't put much stock in left or right anymore, but many people who are still in my old belief system, my old cult of ideology, social justice or woke ideology, many of them do. And so I use those terms to help identify what I'm talking about. But it doesn't mean everyone on the left. It doesn't mean everyone who is a liberal or a progressive. It's, when I use it, I should be more specific that I'm talking about social justice ideology or woke ideology, which is how it's known, most known colloquially now. Woke is interesting to me, the word woke, because it quickly became the most popular term to describe my old belief system. When I first started speaking out against it, social justice was still the most popular term, and then woke just became huge, in large part due to the work of people like, I think, James Lindsay, Chris Rufo, people who were helping to spread awareness about what it is. But now it's become so popular that sometimes it's becoming misused, and I think the word is starting to lose some of its meaning. Like, a lot of words currently are losing meaning in this culture. Words like woman or harm or violence. And woke is one of those words that I do see it being stretched now to mean things other than social justice ideology. And that is not how I use the word. When I use it, I mean social justice ideology. I mean a belief system that says the best way to look at the world is as a competition between different identity groups for power. And the way to reach equality or equity is to redistribute power among identity groups, which necessitates treating people differently on the basis of their race or their sex. And that's what I'm talking about when I mention woke. And so if anybody in that woke world, that social justice world, is watching, I hope you'll stick with us, because I know you have a lot of misunderstandings about what it is that the people who oppose DEI believe. And if your beliefs are strong and you're confident in them, you should be able to listen to someone explain themselves and try to explain themselves clearly, and with an attempt at understanding them, even if you still disagree, with an attempt at understanding what they're actually saying, instead of building up straw men and attacking things that they haven't said and don't believe. So I hope you will stick with us. A couple of other super chats from John before we get started. John Thomas, thank you for the $20 super chat, John Thomas. He says, Keri, you should interview Jill Barup. She does fight scene reviews, and politically, she's probably like J.K. Rowling, left-leaning but pro-woman. She never gets political on her channel, but they tried to cancel her in 2022 because of it. I've never heard of this woman. Hold on, let me write this down. Jill Barup. Thank you very much for the recommendation. I will check her out. If you guys have recommendations, as always, you can leave them in a chat or a comment below the video. Oh, and another one from John Thomas. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Says also she just wrote a novel, Breaking the Fourth Wall, after we bullied her into it after a bunch of shorts just stabbed me out, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and other places. Okay. I will definitely look this lady up. And if Two Sisters and Some Yarn is here, one of the wrong knitters, Help me remember this one. Help me remember this one. I've got a whole list of people I want to interview and people who've contacted me about interviewing them. So I'm trying to get them all scheduled. Thank you very much. Okay. Andrew says some people think being called woke is a compliment. Yeah, some of them still do. A lot of them think it's negative now because they call it a pejorative sometimes because because it's become most often when it's spoken about, it's in a negative way because a lot of people are critical of it now. But there are still a few who wear it proudly. So, okay. So today we're going to talk about DEI. And the reason it's on my mind, maybe it's on your mind, is it's in the news a lot lately. If you happen to be a person who's online a lot, like I am, you've seen people debating it, discussing it. Mark Cuban, in particular, has been talking about it and defending it quite a bit. And in doing so, he has, in my opinion, exposed the fact that he doesn't actually understand what equity means or what racism is. I think he's bought into this new social justice or ideology definition of racism, which says that racism is prejudice plus power, or that it's somehow race dependent. Like racism is dependent on what racial group you're in, which it's not. So we're going to look through some of his comments and some of the responses, some of the great responses to his comments, some of the video clips and stuff that have been circulating recently to hopefully make the case to anyone on the left who may be watching that DEI is racist. Okay, let's pull up the first one of these. Here we go. Now, Mark Cuban has been talking about this for weeks now, I believe. And so you can find a number of these to talk about. Here, I'll make this a little bit larger. But I wanted to start with this one because this one got a lot of great responses. He said, Mark Cuban, here, actually, let me put, I've got the response where he's quoted, but let me share, there we go, his actual original tweet instead. Okay, so here it is. He said, I can say with 100% confidence that anyone who believes equity is about providing equal outcomes, which it is, does not understand what the equity in DEI is. DEI being diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then he says, equal outcomes is the disclaimer that the anti-DEI movement uses to try to scapegoat DEI as unusable and unsuitable. You will not find that in any corporate DEI program. He's wrong. Ever. Feel free to provide a company website that says equality of outcomes to prove me wrong. It's just the ridiculous commentary. How would that even work? Have everyone who started the same day at comparable jobs all have the exact same career progression? I look forward to all of the basically he makes fun of people there saying that the only evidence people are going to be able to offer is anecdotal is basically what he's saying. So it's already gotten a community note. People are pointing out how he's wrong in the community note. And so it says readers added context that they thought people might want to know. Some DEI training programs do specifically define equity as being about equality of outcomes. And so then they have a few links here showing this. Here's a direct quote from diversio.com. Equity, on the other hand, refers to fairness and equality in outcomes. Here's another one. In an inclusion model, it's about ensuring equality of outcome. So we're going to look through even more of these. It's even the vice president, Kamala Harris, has talked about how equity is about equality of outcome. So the fact that he's saying it's not about that is weird, but it's also what they tend to do a lot in the social justice world. If you think about how they usually react when you talk about transing kids, for example. Pick any topic that they disagree with you on. You know, most people in the woke or social justice world They support these medical interventions and surgeries that in some cases sterilize children, that include double mastectomies on children, removing their reproductive organs, taking skin off their arm to try and construct a fake phallus. They support these things, and when you talk about it with them, sometimes what they start off by saying is that that's not happening, which is what he's saying here. They start from a place of, well, there's no sterilization happening of children, or there's no double mastectomies happening in children. When you come back and show them, well, actually, it is happening, here are examples, then they say, well, I guess it is happening, but it's a good thing. And here's why. And then they go on to explain why it's a good thing. So they have these stages that they respond in. And so Mark Cuban is in that first part of that stage where he's saying it doesn't happen. It's not true. And now we're at the place in this sort of public debate about it on his timeline where people are showing him it is true. Here are some DEI programs that say it's about providing equal outcomes. So now I'm just waiting for him to get to the next stage where he says, okay, it's true, but here's why it's a good thing. So let's go through there have been some amazing responses to this. And Colin Wright, who some of you may know or may recognize from this channel, from Deprogrammed. I've been able to interview him before. He does great work, especially on gender ideology. And his lady, Christina Buttons, I've also interviewed her. If you want to go back and watch those interviews, Colin Wright has been documenting some of the best responses to Mark Cuban, and so we're going to look at some of those. Here is, let's start with James Lindsay, actually. So James Lindsay, in response to that claim by Mark Cuban that it's not about equality of outcomes, he just posted some melty smiley faces with some direct screenshots of examples where it is actually described as that. So here we go. Equity, a state in which all people in a given society receive what they need to be successful. It is about fairness and justice and focuses on equal outcomes, not equal inputs. Recognizing that different individuals have different access, challenges, needs, and histories. Okay? It's about equal outcomes. What does that mean when you're talking about the workforce or you're talking about academia? Well, the people who push this, they look at any racial disparity or any gender disparity in something that they view as prestigious or something that is desirable. And they say that that disparity is necessarily the result of systemic racism or systemic sexism. And therefore, because they are believers in social justice, they believe we have to treat people differently. We have to discriminate against individuals on the basis of race and sex in order to overcome that systemic racism and sexism. So what it looks like in academia is colleges for 4 decades, until the Supreme Court ruling that overturned this last year, which was a historic ruling. For 4 decades, colleges have been admitting people in large part on the basis of race and sex. They're looking at demographics of groups, and universities like Harvard, for example, have been saying, wow, we have too many Asian people who are, scoring at the high end of the spectrum, who are qualified to be here. And so we're going to accept fewer Asian people. And, we have a small percentage of Black students, or we have a small percentage of Latino students, or we have a smaller percentage of women than we would like. And so we're going to consider that a factor when those individuals are applying, and we're going to boost them up. So they don't have to have, test scores that are as high. Someone with a lower test score can be accepted over an Asian person, or in some cases a white person with a much higher test score. It mostly affected Asian students, although to some degree it did affect white students. So this has been happening for 4 decades. This is racist. If you are admitting someone to college or hiring them for a job based on their race, based on their immutable identity, the group that they happen to be in, that's racist. You're giving them an advantage based on their race, based on their sex, based on their sexuality, all these different categories of identity that social justice is obsessed with. That's not equality. That's not anti-racism. That's not liberalism. It's not individualism. It's collectivism. And so that's what's been happening at colleges. If you look in the hiring practices that Mark Cuban's talking about, he's been defending for weeks considering race and sex as important factors when hiring. That necessarily means you are looking at those things as is more important than looking for the best person for the job. It reminds me of when Biden, before he announced his vice presidential running mate, do you guys remember? He said this very, in my opinion, racist, sexist, condescending thing where he said that his VP running mate was going to be a woman of color. It's so insulting. And then later he announced it's Kamala Harris. I was thinking at the time, whoever that woman is when she's announced, like if it were me, if I were ever in a position like that where someone announced ahead of time they were going to be selecting a woman and then they selected me for something, it's like that is so insulting because you're basically telling everyone that you didn't pick the best person for the job, that I'm not the best person for the job, that you picked me because of my sex. It's completely insulting. But that is what DEI says. That's how it instructs people to behave and operate in the world. So let's continue because I think it's important just to go through these numerous examples proving what the people who support equity themselves say it is. They say it's equal outcomes. Okay, let's continue. Here's another James Lindsay shared. What is racial equity? Racial equity, according to the organization Race Forward. I used to work with the board of Race Forward, by the way. This is one of the social justice or woke organizations that I worked with when I was in that cult. And that's funny. I'm very familiar with them. Okay. Racial equity, according to the organization Race Forward, is the process of eliminating racial disparities and improving outcomes for everyone. They envision, like, let's say, look at STEM, for example. People who are in this cult, they will look at the statistics of men and women in STEM, and they will say there are not enough women in STEM. It must be the result of sexism. Therefore, we have to prioritize women who are applying for these positions. We have to essentially hire them because they are women. They assume that if there were no racism or sexism, that you would see equal proportions based on race and sex in these different fields, which is not true. Women, on average, women report that they prefer working with people or animals to working with things. Let me give an anecdote. I went to a science and math high school with some of the smartest people I've ever met, who've gone on to work in a variety of incredible fields. Most of the men that I know from that school went on to work in science or math, which is what the school was about. A lot of the women from that school, like myself, I got a science degree, but I didn't end up working in it. A lot of the women chose to work in other areas. That's just an anecdote, but I think that bears out that men and women are not exactly the same. We don't have exactly the same interests. And if you think about it, the people who push equity, who push this sort of, we want an exact proportion of percentages in every field, they're liars. They don't actually care about the percentages in fields that they don't view as desirable. That's why you will often hear people bring up, well, why don't you care about the percentage of female, trash collectors, which is almost zero? Why is there no push to get more women into it? Must be sexism. That's why women are not in trash collecting. It's not that they don't want to do it. We want to do it. We're breaking down the doors. Let us pick up your garbage. Quit being sexist. In that field, the people who push equity, I think they don't care because they don't view it as desirable. And deep down, they know it's because women are not as interested in working in that field or willing to work in that field. I'll put it that way, willing. The sanitation department, why are they never saying, oh, look at the percentage of women in the sanitation department? This horrible sexism. There's a shit ceiling keeping women. They just need to break through that ceiling. They're never arguing this. So let's continue. Okay. I'm sorry I interrupted the quote. I just had to explain how they view it. This sort of we must have this exact percentage, except in these places we don't care about because then it's just a matter of choice, right? Okay. Racial equity, according to the organization Race Forward, is the process of eliminating racial disparities and improving outcomes. There it is, outcomes for everyone. It is the intentional and continual practice of changing policies, practices, systems, and structures by prioritizing measurable change in the lives of people of color. Everyone benefits when racial equity is upheld. We do? Regardless of the race of the person, because when equity is at the center of community life, citizens are allocated the resources and opportunities they need to create equal outcomes. There it is, to create equal outcomes. Parentheses, but not in sanitation. For all community members to thrive. Here's another one that contradicts what Mark Cuban is claiming. Another one that James Lindsay shared, the equity imperative, equitable access, equal outcomes. That's the title. Equitable access to resources and opportunities that guarantee fair, just, and affirming experiences and produce equal outcomes for every student without exception. In academia, what they want to see is similar to the workforce and these fields that they view as desirable. They say if you don't see the percentages that they want to see of students, when you look at test scores, if you look at tardiness, if you look at disciplinary actions, if you don't see an exactly proportionate representation, they say that this is then it's because of racism, it's because of sexism. So they want to see equal outcomes, and the schools have an incentive to produce equal outcomes, even if that's not reality. This is why you see some schools now that have become infected with DEI, which is part of social justice and woke ideology. You will see them getting rid of grading altogether and argue why grading is oppressive and discriminatory towards people of color. You will see them ceasing to report behavioral problems or to discipline students if they are students of color, because they want to have equal outcomes at the end of the year. This doesn't help, and that previous slide we saw said that it said that it helps everyone. This doesn't help anyone. It certainly doesn't help these racial groups that they claim to be helping. You're setting those children up for failure if you don't treat them the same as everyone else. You're setting them up for failure because you're not teaching them anything. You're not teaching them consequences of bad behavior in the classroom or being tardy. You're basically saying you can do what you want. You're training children, in effect, to be little sociopaths. You're rewarding or ignoring bad behavior so you can have on paper at the end of the year as a school equal outcomes. Here's the last one James Lindsay shared in this tweet. And this is the one I referenced before. This is the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, contradicting Mark Cuban. So she tweets, there's a big difference between equality and equity. Yes, we agree. Then she has a picture there of two people climbing a mountain. It looks like it's a little cartoon. It looks like a white guy and a black guy. And then at the bottom, it says, equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place. Well, that's not equality. That's not freedom. That doesn't allow for individuality, individual choices. It doesn't allow for merit. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this one. I've got another great response for you. Just a quick thank you to Superbased, who gifted 5 Deprogrammed memberships. You're my membership fairy and you're back. Thank you, sir, for being here. I appreciate you. And then Channel Julio, hello, he's for $4.99, says, we need to promote our values in a trio to counter DEI. For a start, how about merit, achievements, and grit or gumption? MAG. Did you choose MAG on purpose? I like that. I like this idea. They're very good at branding. The woke. They're very good at branding and naming things and manipulating people through language. I think part of the reason the people who oppose this stuff are not as great at it is because there's a large portion of us who are very wary of trying to manipulate. I'm not saying coming up with a great acronym is manipulating. I'm just saying on a large scale, I think some of the stuff they do that helps them to control the thoughts of others is manipulative, and in fact wanting to control the thoughts of others is part of the problem. But yeah, we do need to get better at branding. So I like it. If you have other suggestions, you can drop them in the chat. Merit, achievements, grit. What else would you put on this list? What would be a great acronym for the values, for the qualities that we believe in? I like it. Thank you very much. Okay. This one is one of my favorite responses, of course. And I saw someone in the chat here say Jordan Peterson came swinging off the high ropes. So this is Dr. Jordan Peterson, someone I greatly admire and respect, as you know. And he sort of steps into this and starts talking about it as well. And so this is his response to that tweet by Mark Cuban. He says, this is truly one of the most clueless missives I have ever seen on Twitter, and that is a hard contest to win. Mark Cuban, where the hell have you been for the last 20 years? Because the world you think you live in bears absolutely no resemblance to the world that currently exists. What exactly do you think transpired around Harvard and Claudine Gay? Let me guess, systemic racism, poor Dr. Gay. Do you understand the depth of the rot of her appalling display at Congress revealed and was echoed by the presidents of MIT and UPenn? Let me put it so you could understand it if you had ears to hear and eyes to see. And then he, in all caps, says equity is 100% about equality of outcome. The purposeful cloud of linguistic confusion around the term is there to allow moralizing blind enablers such as yourself to maintain their delusional allyship. Oh, he phrased that so well. That's exactly why they obscure what a lot of these woke and social justice terms mean. That's why he's right. They obscure the real meaning. They use a lot of word salad. They purposefully try to hide what is being said so that you don't understand what's being said, and so that you rush in like Mark Cuban to defend things that you don't even understand because you think you're being a good person. You think you're being an ally. So he continues, and you take the bait to assuage your guilt for whatever you may have had to do in the course of your life, perhaps while amassing your fortune. That's between you and God, and rightly so. But in the meantime, the rest of us can only watch and wonder in utterly open-mouthed amazement. He continues here, and I really appreciate this one as well. He says, here's something to consider, Mark Cuban. Since we're apparently considering things, there is little to no temperamental difference between races. Temperamental variability is arguably the primary source of communicable diversity among human beings. So where in the world does that much vaunted but never measured economically valuable diversity come from? Does it come from the air? No, it comes from your imagination, which is exactly where the moral virtue you are trying to obtain by your cringing allyship also comes from. He just slaps him down. If you need someone to parse out what he's saying here, I mean, he's basically saying people like Mark Cuban like to argue that you need people of different races or you need people of different sex so that you have diversity, and diversity is a strength. I'm sure you've heard that expression before. Diversity is a strength. And a lot of what they base that on, and Mark Cuban, I'm about to show you a tweet that proves he bases it on this. They base it on this racist and sexist opinion, this belief, this racist and sexist, untrue belief that there's only one opinion or way of looking at the world if you're Black, and there's only one if you're white, and there's a different one if you're a man and a woman, that there is a Black viewpoint, that there is a male viewpoint, that there is a white viewpoint or a female viewpoint or a gay viewpoint. They look at people and reduce them to whatever identity groups they're in. And then they judge them to be all the same in that identity group. If that identity group is race, that makes you a racist, or that makes your belief at least racist. If that identity group is sex, that makes your belief sexist. That they all share the same viewpoint. Here's how I know. Here's how I know this is what Mark Cuban thinks. This is another tweet he did in the course of this public discussion. He's talking to the rabbit hole. I have some excellent responses here from the rabbit hole pulled up as well. We're going to look through some of those. But the rabbit hole has been very patiently trying to help him understand equity and to see what's wrong, what's racist about his way of approaching hiring. And so in the course of this conversation, Mark Cuban said to the rabbit hole, so let's turn it around. He says, you're the CEO of a successful company that has 30 employees that are all Black women. Well, first of all, let me tell you what happened before this. It started with a different tweet where Mark Cuban was saying, if you look at your company or, whatever kind of, let's say it's a stock company. I'm paraphrasing now. He didn't say stock company, whatever. He says, if you look at your company and you've got 30 employees and they're all white men, shouldn't you then decide to hire a Black person, a Black woman? Like that's him saying all those white, there's no diversity at that stock company. But why? Because they're all white men and their white men are all the same. And there's a white male way of thinking and a white male perspective and opinion. And we need to bring in diversity in skin color and gender, because that comes with a different way of looking at the world. It doesn't. So he was asking that, and people like the rabbit hole were responding. And so then we get to this tweet where he says, so let's turn it around. You are CEO of a successful company that has 30 employees that are all Black women, and you think a different perspective will help you grow the firm. Do you see what he just did there? He thinks all 30 of those Black women have the same perspective. That's incredibly racist and sexist. They're all the same. He says that has 30 employees that are all Black women, and you think a different perspective will help you grow the firm. So you decide you want to hire a white man. Oh, so he's going to bring in some diversity. What? He says you would be against that, right? Yes, of course, Mark Cuban. I think he doesn't understand what we believe. This is what I mean by people who support DEI. They don't understand equity. They don't understand racism. Their brains have become so garbled with woke redefinitions. They don't understand it. And they have no idea what we believe, because he thinks we would be he thinks we would say, no, I wouldn't be against that. You should hire the white guy. Yeah, you do need a white guy in there because you only have Black women. No, the answer is still the same. It's still the same, Mark Cuban. Even if you have 30 employees and they're all Black women, you still hire the best employee for the job. You don't go out and say, let me find a white guy. Let me hire someone based on race and sex because I got all Black women here and they all think the same. I got to get a white guy because he's going to think different. No. This guy's clueless. Jordan Peterson also responded to this with a little bit of crude mockery. And he said, he summarized Mark Cuban's tweet as, all those Black bitches think the same. Sincerely, Mark Cuban. Which is a funny way of, yes, summarizing what Mark Cuban thinks. And then he shared this video clip, which is great. This is from a podcast called Pirate Wires, and the Rabbit Hole had shared this. And I think they can say this more succinctly than I am, and so I'm going to let them speak. Here, let's turn this volume all the way up. Here they are discussing this.
Solana, you actually had a really good tweet on this that kind of sums up how I feel, where I think you were quote tweeting Mark, where he was talking about, this hypothetical situation where you have a company with 30 Black women, and you decide you want a diversity of perspective. So you decide to hire a white man. Is that, should that be illegal?
Right. He asks that because he asked that question to the Rabbit, and he was asking it like obviously it should be okay to hire the white man in this case because you want that diverse opinion.
Right. And you're pointing out how how incredibly patronizing it is. And of course, incorrect of Mark Cuban to assume that somehow 30 Black women are all going to be this perspectival monolith, right? They're all going to have the same views on things. And, you can understand that white man is going to have X opinion and Black woman is going to have Y opinion. And you want to have roughly equal representation of those two opinions. I just think the only way out of this is litigation. I agree. Someone needs to basically take, a company that's proven to be engaging in racist hiring practices to court and basically get enshrined yet again that there are penalties for this kind of thing. But on a basic sort of, what does this say about the people who are pushing these hiring practices? I think it's just patronizing. And as we always say, it's really racist. Why are they assuming that because of your race or sexuality, you have, a certain set of opinions? It's just definitionally racist.
Yeah, I want to actually underscore that point that you just raised on the 30 Black women thing, because it's crazy that he said this casually out loud. He said, and Matt, pull up the tweet. He is saying that if you have a room of 30 Black women, you really only have one opinion there. And there's a benefit to your company in bringing in another, quote, diverse opinion. He's trying to sort of turn this on the anti-DEI people, because his assumption is that the anti-DEI people are actually white supremacists. And they will see this and they will think, oh, wow, there's a dangerous possibility there of 30 Black women. We better bring in a white opinion. But of course, the anti-DEI people are like, That's crazy that you think all Black women think exactly the same, and that you said it out loud, and that you're the one who is over here pretending that you're anti-racist. It's fucking bananas. And I think it's just, that stuff is definitely over culturally. And now there's this really, really fascinating fight to save face. Like Mark Cuban is someone who has, put a lot into this conversation publicly, and to just kind of give up and be like, okay, the federal government is now telling me I'm potentially at risk of litigation here. I better just back up and apologize for my racism and try and do better. Like, he's really trying to just kind of rewrite history here and get to a point where, I don't know, he hasn't just taken yet another massive L in what was really just like, I mean, this was 24 hours and is straight. Like, he wouldn't let it go, but it's been, at this point, I think, months of this. Brandon River, any final thoughts on Mark Cuban versus the cartoon rabbit before we carry on?
I love this so much because this guy, he's responding the way that a lot of us felt when we were reading that. It's laughable that they don't see it. Having been in the social justice and the woke cult, I think your brain is so twisted with brainwashing and with redefinitions of words, and it's hard to think clearly. And so sometimes those of us who have left that cult, or those of us who were never in it and critique it and criticize it, we look at it and we say, I've heard this refrain a lot, can he not hear himself? Can Mark Cuban not hear himself, what he's saying? And the reality is he can't, because he's speaking within a path that has been laid out for him with barriers to thought, with barriers to logical thinking. You're basically, I've described it this way before. If you think of your brain like a rat in a maze, right? And he's got all these different avenues he can go. When you're in a cult, when you're in a very high control group that controls the way you speak and the way you think about things, it's almost like they block off all those different exits in the maze, all those different avenues where the mouse can go. And the mouse is just allowed one single corridor that's left. And so he can't hear himself. He can't consider going down any of these other paths. He has to say the DEI mantra. He has to say the cult language. He has to say it. To do otherwise, I think, would just shatter this belief system that he's invested himself in, the way he interprets the world. So no, he's not thinking or speaking critically. He's just repeating, this is anti-racism. And when you point out, but it's not, it's racist. He can't hear that. And it causes him to say things like this. It causes him to say 30 Black women are all exactly the same, essentially. And to have diversity, then you need to hire based on race and sex, and hire a white guy, because then you'll have diversity, and that's going to help your company. How? I don't know. It's incredible. Okay. I told you I was going to pull up some of the rabbit holes posts about this, because this account has done some of, as I said, the most patient pushback on Mark Cuban, and really trying to help him understand. But I think from Mark Cuban's perspective, he tends to respond a lot of times with preemptive sarcasm or mockery, and I think that's because he thinks that now there are people responding to him with mockery, or there are many, but I think he is reading all of it now as mockery, and so he can't see the good faith, the good intentions of some of the accounts that are actually trying to help him. They're not trying to dunk, they're trying to help. Some people are trying to dunk, but some are trying to help. And so the rabbit hole's been doing a great job of this. So this is that same quote that we started with, where Mark Cuban says, I can say with 100% confidence that anyone who believes equity is about providing equal outcomes does not understand what the equity in DEI is, which we've already shown that's not true. Equal outcomes is the disclaimer that the anti-DEI movement uses to try to scapegoat DEI as unusable and unsuitable. You will not find that in any corporate DEI program ever. Feel free to provide a company website that says equality of outcomes to prove me wrong. So he quotes Mark Cuban, the rabbit hole, and then says, sure, let's prove this wrong. Attached are examples from Kamala Harris, Disney, and Microsoft. So again, let's look at just a few of these. Here's one. Looking forward, equity, not equality. And then they've got this little chart, and I shared a similar one in the thumbnail in the artwork for today's show, which some of you may be familiar with, and it's based on one like this. This is how they usually like to portray it. They like to portray equality, and they show 3 people trying to watch a sporting event over a fence, and they all have the same size block to stand on. And of course, the tallest person, because he happens to be tall, has a great view of the sporting event that's happening on the other side of the fence. The shorter person can barely see it, and then there's someone who is in some of these images is very short, or in this image is in a wheelchair, and so they can't see at all. They say this is equality and it's unfair. We don't all have, if you give everyone the same block basically to stand on, if you give everyone equality of opportunity, there are going to be people who don't have equality of outcome. That's what they're saying, because the blocks are not enough. You need to give people different size blocks. You need to give them, instead of a quality of opportunity, you need to discriminate against people on the basis of race and sex and sexuality, and you need to give some people an advantage based on their race and sex and sexuality. You need to give them an advantage, give them a bigger block. That's what they say. And so you can see that there on the equity side, where they take the block away from the tall person. That's like taking college admission away from Asians, which was happening at Harvard and UNC, which is happening in tons of colleges. They take the block away. You don't deserve this. And then they give it to the shorter person. And so now she has a better vantage point. And then they build a very large block or ramp for the handicapped person so he can see. So they say this is equity. Well, in the image I shared in the artwork, it's a little bit different. It says equity in reality. And in reality, what they do is they cut everyone's legs off so nobody can see over the fence. That is exactly how equity works in real life. They handicap everyone. But in this screenshot here, they're going to describe it for us, not just with this picture in this cartoon. They're going to describe it for us. So they say, equality is a noble goal. Equal treatment and access to opportunities help each of us perform our best within a shared set of parameters. But we really need to be striving for equity. See, equality, they view equality as bad. It's not good enough. Equality of opportunities is bad. It's not good enough. You can't just remove racist and sexist discrimination. You have to then put it back in and implement it the way you want it to go. That's what they believe. They don't believe in equality. They believe in racist and sexist discrimination. They say it's necessary to end racist and sexist discrimination. Okay, so it says, but we really need to be striving for equity, where we focus on the equality of the outcome, not the equality of the experience, by taking individual needs and skills into account. There it is, equality of outcome. Here's the example from Kamala Harris, where she talks about how there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equity means we all end up in the same place. Equality of outcome. Here's a third. One of these was from Disney, one's from Microsoft. It is imperative that we follow through on our commitment to create opportunities that produce equitable outcomes for the sustainable growth of Black and African Americans owned businesses. Together with our supplier community, we will hold ourselves accountable to creating meaningful and impactful change to transform the economic state of Black and African American communities. How are they going to do that? With equitable outcomes, with racist discrimination. I would argue that's not the way to do that. So the rabbit hole continued with several great examples and resources. So we're going to read through some of these. The rabbit hole. Thank you to James Lindsay for helping me gather these. It includes sources and YouTube videos. These are examples. So here's the first example they give. Christopher Rufo, a scoop. The Walt Disney Corporation claims that America was founded on systemic racism and encourages employees to complete a, quote, white privilege checklist and separates minorities into racially segregated affinity groups. And there's a whole thread you can read there on that. All of that's racist. All of it. And there's more, says the rabbit hole. Here's another example. This one was originally from James Lindsay. In honor of Mark Cuban, here's Pennsylvania's state system of higher education. Quote, equity promotes policies and practices that result in equal outcomes. Let's read the whole thing. This is from Penn State. Equity refers to the concept of fairness. Equity ensures that individuals are provided the resources they need to have access to the same opportunities. While equity represents impartiality, it doesn't. This is where they say the exact opposite of the truth. They do this all the time. Look at what they call things in their social justice woke lexicon. They call racism anti-racism. They name things the exact opposite of what they are. It's one of the most basic con artist manipulative tactics. It's sociopathic what they're doing. Pathological. They're sitting here telling us that this is impartial, that treating people differently on the basis of their race and their sex is impartial. It's not. It's the very definition of partiality. Being partial to one race over another, being partial to one sex over another. They are sitting here with a straight face, and you're going to see this in other examples. They are sitting here with a straight face, and they are saying being partial to a person on the basis of race and sex is impartial. It sounds crazy when you phrase it that way because it is crazy what they are doing. Up is down, down is up. There's a Bible verse about people who substitute up for down, down for up, sweet for sour, sour for sweet, good for evil, evil for good. That's what they are doing here. This is an evil lie. While equity represents impartiality, they say, no, it represents partiality. While equity represents impartiality, the distribution is made in such a way to even opportunities for all people. Conversely, equality indicates uniformity, where everything is evenly distributed among people. Equity recognizes that people have different starting points in life and provides resources and opportunities and promotes policies and practices that result in equal outcomes. There's the equal outcomes part. You know what? People do have different starting points in life. And it's not based on a single identity category. You can't apply a solution without, you can't apply a one size fits all solution because you're assuming a one size fits all problem. There are young white males who are born into extreme poverty and abuse. Okay? They're starting out at, how do they put it? A different starting point in life. But what equity proposes is that we discriminate against them even more because they're white and male as they grow up. We limit their opportunities on the basis of their race and sex, no matter where they started in life. It doesn't look at people as individuals. It looks at people as identity groups, which is flawed. Everyone who is Black is not born in to poverty and abuse and discrimination. Everyone who is white is not born into privilege and opportunity. It's unbelievable to me sometimes when I talk about this stuff. It's unbelievable that we are at this place in society in 2024, after all the progress that we had made in previous decades, to end up here, to undo so much of that progress and get back to this place where suddenly the culturally dominant belief system says, yeah, I think it's a good idea to look at people as identity groups and treat them differently on the basis of those identity groups. We should do that. That's probably good. That's probably the solution. Let me just switch over to this because I've got another example queued up of this absolute bald-faced lie that equity is impartial. This absolute upside down claim. And this one's a pretty impressive source that makes this claim. This is Joe Biden's executive order of June 2021. Executive Order on Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, and Accessibility in the Federal Workforce. DEI. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including sections 1104, 3301, and 3302 of Title V United States Code, and in order to strengthen the federal workforce by promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, it is hereby ordered as follows. Why should we be promoting those things, by the way? They just skip right past why we should do it. Okay. Section 1, policy. On my first day in office, I signed Executive Order 13985, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, which established that affirmatively advancing equity, civil rights, racial justice, and equal opportunity is the responsibility of the whole of our government. It's not. The responsibility of the government is to enforce the laws, to create and enforce laws, and to stay the hell out of our individual rights. To further advance equity within the federal government, this order establishes that it is the policy of my administration to cultivate a workforce that draws from the full diversity of the nation. As the nation's largest employer, the federal government must be a model for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, where all employees are treated with dignity and respect. Accordingly, the federal government must strengthen its ability to recruit, hire, develop, promote, and retain our nation's talent and remove barriers to equal opportunity. What does that mean? It means remove equality, remove equality of opportunity, remove equal access. It means implement racist and sexist discrimination. That's what it means. It must also provide resources and opportunities to strengthen and advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility across the federal government. The federal government should have a workforce that reflects the diversity of the American people. Again, why do you assume that? Why? You don't assume that about trash collecting. You don't assume that about basketball teams. Why are you assuming that? Why is the FAA now assuming that all of their employees need to reflect the diversity of the country? Why? It's based on a false belief. I don't even know if it's a belief, because I don't know if some of them believe it, but a false premise that men and women have this, we're exactly the same, that we have the same affinities, that we we should be represented, in every field except for a few that they leave out, right? That they don't care about. But we should be represented exactly proportionally. They don't acknowledge it in sports. It's interesting. It depends, though. It depends. If you look at the field of sports, they are currently pushing DEI, social justice, woke into women's sports, right? They're saying men should be able to compete, etc. But they're in the area of race, they're very hesitant. You would never see Mark Cuban saying, "Oh, I'm looking around at this team of 30 basketball players." He said earlier about if you have 30 employees and they're all black women, you need to hire a white man. He would never say that if what he's talking about is a basketball team. Why not? Maybe we should hire an Asian woman to be on this basketball team. We need some diversity up in here. Okay. A growing body of evidence demonstrates that diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible workplaces yield higher performing organizations. Federal merit system principles include that the federal government's recruitment policy should endeavor to achieve a workforce from all segments of society, and that all employees and applicants for employment should receive fair and equitable treatment in all aspects of personnel management. And then it goes on. Look at this, the name of this executive order: promoting diversity and inclusion in the national security workforce. It looks like all he's been doing is passing executive orders with DEI in the title, many of them. Preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. That one should be called promoting discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation. I'm going to scroll on down. The federal government is at its best when drawing upon all parts of society. Our greatest accomplishments are achieved when diverse perspectives are brought to bear to overcome our greatest challenges. Diverse perspectives are needed. Again, they operate under the racist and sexist premise that a diversity in skin color or sex means you're going to have a diversity of perspectives. It doesn't. Are all brought to bear to overcome our greatest challenges, and all persons should receive equal treatment under the law. What a bold-faced lie. Because this is an executive order saying you shouldn't receive equal treatment, that your race should be considered first, that your sex should be considered first. This is a bald-faced lie. This order reaffirms support for and builds upon the procedures established by executive orders, blah, blah, blah. The Presidential Memorandum on Promoting Diversity and Inclusion in the National Security Workforce. Look at all these titles. The National Security Memorandum on Revitalizing America's Foreign Policy and National Security Workforce Institutions and Partnerships. This order establishes that diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are priorities for my administration and benefit the entire federal government and the nation, and establishes additional procedures to advance these priorities across the federal workforce. Look at this. Definitions. For the purpose of this order, in the context of the federal workforce, the term underserved communities. Now, that phrase, that social justice woke phrase, they swap it in and out with oppressed and marginalized. They use those interchangeably. The term underserved communities, or the oppressed or the marginalized, refers to populations sharing a particular characteristic as well as geographic communities who have been systemically denied a full opportunity to participate in aspects of economic, social, and civic life. In the context of the federal workforce, this term includes individuals who belong to, now they start to list all the identity categories within social justice, within woke ideology, that they consider to be marginalized and oppressed groups. And they just list them out. And here we go. Communities of color, such as Black and African American, Hispanic and Latino, Native American, Alaska Native and Indigenous, Asian American, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and North African persons. It also includes individuals who belong to communities that face discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, gender nonconforming, and non-binary LGBTQ plus persons. Persons who face discrimination based on pregnancy or pregnancy-related conditions, parents, and caregivers. It also includes individuals who belong to communities that face discrimination based on their religion or disability, first-generation professionals or first-generation college students, individuals with limited English proficiency, immigrants, individuals who belong to communities that may face employment barriers because of older age or former incarceration, persons who live in rural areas, veterans and military spouses, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty, discrimination, or inequality. Individuals may belong to more than one underserved community and face intersecting barriers. There's that intersectionality, social justice woke word there. The term diversity means the practice of including the many communities, identities, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, abilities, cultures, and beliefs of the American people. You know what they actually don't care about, and they're freaking lying here? They don't care about different beliefs. They want everybody who is of the social justice belief system, but just has a different skin color or different sex. So they all look different, but they're all the Borg. They want it to be like what they claim it is, like what Mark Cuban claims it is. They wish the world where all Black women have exactly the same belief and the same opinion and the same perspective. And all the white people that they hire do as well. And all the gay people they hire and all the straight people they want people who look different on the outside, but have the same opinion, the same belief system, the same perspective. They don't care about diversity of perspective, which is the only kind of diversity that matters. Here we go. The term equity means the consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial. There it is. We've been building up to this. Impartial. They call it impartial. It is the definition of partiality. And here is Joe Biden saying equity, treating people with partiality based on their race or their sex, that is impartial. There it is. The term equity means the consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment. Wow. Incredible, right? Bold-faced lie. Right there on whitehouse.gov. Pretty disgusting. I'm going to stop reading that now. John Thomas, thank you for the super chat at $5. He says, Cuban knows he is lying. He doesn't care. He's a fascist in the original meaning. Yeah, the real meaning, right? The real meaning, which is government working with corporations, which is what he wants to enforce totalitarianism. Thank you for the super chat. I don't know if he knows he's lying or not. You might be right. I'm not sure. I think it's hard to tell with some of these people if they are sincere or not in what they say they believe. Andrew Joyner, thank you for the super chat for £5. Andrew says, but merit is white supremacy. Robin DeAngelo, probably. Yes. Yes. Merit is terrible. Choosing people based on the right talents and skills and work for the job, that's awful. Except in basketball. John Thomas for $5. Again, thank you, John Thomas. Says the Navy just relieved a woman from ship command for physically assaulting crew in a toxic command environment. I had not heard about that. I'm making a note to go read about that in case we do the Toxic Femme show tonight. Thank you for that. Well, my voice is a little tired now after reading the majority of that terrible executive order. I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I don't know. It's just, even after all these years talking about, examining, critiquing my old belief system, there are days when nothing surprises me, and there are other days where I just stand back in awe at where we are, in awe that the president can just say up is down, down is up like that in an executive order, and it's fine, because the media is complicit too. Academia is complicit, they're all in this ideology, and it's just incredible sometimes that this is where we are. I still maintain optimism, though. I know this ideology is going to die. I know it's going to fall out of favor. It's just a matter of how much destruction it causes along the way. How quickly we can shift the culture to bring all of the followers along, the people who follow wherever culture goes. So, I think I'm gonna wrap this up for today. If you guys have any questions about this, if you have anything you think I should include in a future video, let me know. Or the suggestions like some of you have been giving of people I should talk with, let me know. I appreciate it. You can leave it in the comments below. Your Average Patriot Nerd, hello. Member for 15 months. Thank you so much. Thanks for supporting the channel. It says, keep up the good work, Keri. Well, thank you. I appreciate the support. And I forgot to say this at the beginning. I'm not very good at monetizing. And I know I don't focus on it as much as I should, but I am trying to be cognizant of the fact that I need to plug the places where you can donate if you want to support the show, where you can become a paid subscriber. And so, anyway, I forgot to do that at the beginning again. I had all those announcements and I forgot that. But if you want to support the show, you can give a super chat, or you can become a paid subscriber for as little as $1 a month at YouTube, on Locals, at Subscribestar, or Patreon. And it's greatly appreciated. I also have, hold on one second, Z Highness. Hey, I love your new avatar. Says, can you get Malcolm Flex on your podcast? Let me make a note of that. Thank you for reminding me. I talked with him a while back about having him on the show, and we were trying to work it out. And then he's one of the many people that, scheduling wise, I think I just dropped the ball at some point. I want to get back in touch with him because I would love to talk to him. But yes, thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, I have one more thing I wanted to show you. This is another kind of just a little update or announcement at the beginning that I forgot to do. So I do have a Substack. It's not paid. All the articles are free. You can become a paid subscriber there as well if you want to. That's another way to support Deprogrammed if you want. I did have all the podcasts up there, and I took them down because it was like cluttering it. And I just want to have the essays, the articles up there. But they're all free. At some point, I might put them behind a paywall, but I don't think so. Not for a while, at least. But I am going to start doing some articles that are just for paid subscribers. And those will all be essays about how great my dog is. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. John, what is the pay through on Substack for you? What does that mean? Does that mean how much Does that mean how much they keep and I keep? I'm not even sure. I'll look it up and I'll get you an answer for next time. I should know that, but I don't even know. Okay. I just wrote a new essay. It is free. You can go read it. It's not behind a paywall. It's called Rooting the Cane Out of Myself. And this kind of grew out of some thoughts I had when talking to a pretty new friend this morning, who is someone I met in Amsterdam, who's just very thoughtful and had some questions about the way I see the world. And he was talking about the way he sees the world. And so it kind of grew out of that conversation. And I'm really grateful for him talking with me and the kind of questions he was asking me and the things he was sending for me to read. And so I wrote this essay about rooting the cane out of myself. And in it, I shared a picture of when I first heard years ago the lecture that Jordan Peterson gave on tragedy versus evil. And it's an old video. It's at least 10 years old. It was from an old lecture he had given before he became this cultural phenomenon. And in that lecture is when I first heard him talk about the biblical story of Cain and Abel as being an allegory for the best way to live in the world, the best way to be in the world, two different ways of being in the world. And the way he talked about it, he was sort of explaining how you can view Cain's way of being in the world as, not making the necessary sacrifices, direct sacrifices to please God, insufficient sacrifice, basically. Hubris, arrogance, entitlement, why not me? Why Abel? That whole way of looking at the world. That darkness, right? Jealousy, all of that stuff. And what does Cain's way of being in the world lead to? It leads in the story to murderous rage. He rises up and murders his brother out of, being drunk on pride and ego and entitlement, resentment. And then if you look at Abel and his path as the opposite or a different way of being in the world, what is his path about in that story? It's about making sacrifices that are pleasing to God. It's about gratitude, humility, all of these things. It's almost like the 7 deadly sins and how there's an opposite for each of those. The 7 virtues, there's an opposite one for each one. The opposite of resentment is gratitude. The opposite of humility is hubris, which is what Cain showed. So anyway, I wrote about this because at the time, that video of Jordan Peterson's made probably more of an impact on me than any of his videos about specific ideological things. That video stuck with me when I was first leaving social justice, when I was first stumbling out of it. And I started thinking about it all the time and all the choices I made. And I actually here's a picture of my whiteboard. I bought this whiteboard and I put a line down the middle, and I started, as I would think of them, I would put character attributes and behaviors of Cain on the right side, and I would put the character attributes and behaviors of Abel on the other side. And there were other versions of this board, like specific things and choices that I was faced with, and where I would just try and distill it down to this: am I behaving like Cain, or am I behaving like Abel in this behavior, in this choice? And I thought about it a lot, and it made me think of that famous Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote about how the line dividing good and evil runs down the heart of every man. And so I was thinking of even this board, this line on my whiteboard is like the dividing line between both of those natures in me and in every human. And there's a lot more in this essay, but I think this is the antidote to woke. I think specifically Christ is the antidote to woke, and I say so, but I'm friends with many people who think the antidote is something else or the solution is something else. And I think if we are both aimed towards truth, we're aimed towards the same thing. But I think it's Christ, and I think it's trying to root the Cain out of yourself, trying to live like Abel. I think Abel's way of being in the world, in that story, in that allegory, if you view it as only an allegory, that his way of being in the world is what Jesus talks about as the way, the truth, and the life. The way, the best way to be in the world. The example that God set when he came down and lived as man. These very basic ways of living. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't murder, you know? Don't be weak. Don't be gluttonous. Don't be envious. So I'm not as articulate trying to explain it here on camera, but if you want to read it, yeah, you can find the whole thing on my Substack. It's kerismith.substack.com, and let me know what you think of it. Okay. I think I'm going to wrap this up. As I said, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will see you on Wednesday. If not tonight on Toxic Femme on Midnight's Edge, I will see you on Wednesday. We've got 2 videos. Remember, we've got back-to-back our 6 o'clock, that Christian panel, and at 8 o'clock, a live pop culture with Mystery Chris, where we're going to talk about the 1950s nuclear family as portrayed on television at the time. And we're going to have some great clips to show you guys. And I hope to see you there. Okay. Take care. Have a good rest of your Monday.